Imagine being hired as the CEO of the largest corporation on earth. You've got a title, you've got the responsibility, you've got the pressure, but every time you try to move fast, someone says, "Hold on, did you clear that?" That's the moment America watched when the Supreme Court of the United States, also known as SCOTUS, not POTUS, SCOTUS, ruled 6-3 to strike down a broad presidential tariff authority. Markets ticked up slightly, commentators exploded, and half the country thought, how is the president getting checked like that? This isn't about drama, it's about structure. Today we're going to dissect this properly. But first and foremost, what actually happened? The court that ruled the emergency powers cited did not clearly grant unlimited authority to impose sweeping tariffs without Congress. Translation: if you want broad tariff authority, Congress must clearly authorize it. No implied, no stretched, clear for the second. That doesn't mean the president is powerless in any means necessary. It means the pathway used wasn't strong enough constitutionally. There's a difference. Markets responded positively because some industries view the tariffs as cost burdens, essentially another tax layer. Remove uncertainty and the money breathes easier. But markets are not moral judges. They are stability detectors, and this ruling wasn't about whether tariffs are good or bad. It was about who gets to authorize them. Let's not pretend that frustration isn't real. The president is the commander-in-chief, the chief diplomat, the primary negotiator on the global stage. In high-stakes international trade battles, speed matters. I'm going to say that again. In high-stakes international trade battles, speed matters. If you are negotiating with a rival nation, you can't always say, "Hold on, let me circle back after committee review." That weakens posture. It doesn't make the president weak, it makes the system slow. And in geopolitics, slowness can cost leverage. That's a legitimate argument. You don't want a president who looks like he needs permission every time he wants to apply pressure internationally. You want agility, you want responsiveness, you want executive flexibility, not paralysis. That's not authoritarian, that's strategic. Picture this for a second. The president says, "We are imposing tariffs right away." But Congress says, "Submit it in writing." Supreme Court says, "Cite your authority." Federal judge somewhere in Arkansas says, "Temporary injunction." Then the state attorney general say, "We object." Meanwhile, foreign leaders are sitting there like, so who's in charge? Who do I need to talk to? Who's actually in charge of this whole situation? It's chaotic at the moment right now, and that's how it has always been. But chaos and collapse are not the same thing. Sometimes chaos is just democracy arguing with itself. And it brings me back to my next point. I'm going to give you a simple analogy so you understand. But now, before I explain this, I need you to listen carefully. Because when it comes to geopolitics, power structure, international leverage, I promise you this. Nobody in this world understands the dynamics of power better than I do. So if you're watching this right now, don't half listen, lock in and listen. Because I'm about to simplify something most commentators can't even articulate properly. Imagine you're sitting in a Ferrari. I'm going to say this again. You are sitting in a Ferrari. Not a Toyota, not a minivan, a Ferrari. You're trying to get from point A to point B. You press the gas. You're ready to move. But here's the problem. You grab the steering wheel to go left. And suddenly you realize the back wheels also have a steering wheel. And they're turning right. You push forward harder. Now someone in the passenger seat grabs a second steering wheel and starts turning it slightly towards the shoulder. You try to accelerate, and and somebody in the back seat is easing off the brake. That's the United States government. The president is in the driver's seat. He's trying to move the vehicle in the right direction that he wants it to move in. Whether you agree with that direction or not, but the Congress has a steering wheel. The Supreme Court has a steering wheel. The federal judges have similar steering wheels. The Senate controls the part of the engines. The governor controls the pieces of the road. And sometimes the voters themselves, I'm going to say that again, the voters themselves are adjusting the tire pressure mid-drive. They're lowering the PSI while the car is still moving at 120 miles per hour. And people wonder why the car doesn't move smoothly. It's not because the engine is weak. It's because there are too many hands on the wheel. The United States government is a Ferrari with 4 steering wheels and 5 brake pedals. And somehow it still manages to move forward. So when people say, why can't the president just do it? That's why. Because the president isn't driving alone. And the real debate isn't whether he should be a king. The real debate is how much control should the driver have when the road is this complex. If you don't understand what I said, I'm going to say it again. How much control should the driver have when the road is this complex? Now, here's when things get serious. You think one Supreme Court ruling wipes the board? No. Let's think like strategists, like professionals here. Because even if one tariff pathway gets narrowed down, the president still has multiple legal economic levers available. And I'm going to walk you through them clearly, not emotionally, but strategically. Option 1, let's go with the national security. Section 232. The president could hypothetically say, this is not about general trade policy, this is about national security. Under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, the president can impose tariffs or restrictions if imports threaten national security. Here's how that would work. The Department of Commerce launches an investigation. They examine whether reliance on foreign steel, semiconductors, rare earth minerals, or energy components creates vulnerability. If the investigation concludes there is a threat, the president can impose targeted tariffs or restrictions. So instead of saying, we're raising tariffs broadly, he reframes it, we cannot depend on geopolitical rivals for critical infrastructure. That's not economic aggression. That's strategic defense. Different legal lane, stronger footing, still powerful than ever before. Option number 2, unfair trade practices, Section 301. The president could hypothetically pivot and say, fine, we're not using emergency powers, we're responding to unfair trade. Under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, the executive branch can investigate and respond to intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, currency manipulation, state subsidies that distort markets. And here's what that would look like. The U.S. Trade Representative launches a formal investigation. Evidence is gathered. If unfair practices are confirmed, the president can impose targeted tariffs on specific industries. Notice the shift, not the blanket, not the emotional one. Just notice the shift, it's precise. If country X is subsidizing electric vehicles unfairly, tariffs can be applied to that sector specifically. Surgical instead of sweeping. Sometimes that's even stronger. But let's talk about let's talk about option number 3. Sanctions. Financial leverage. The president could hypothetically decide, instead of tariffs, we apply financial pressure. Sanctions are one of the most powerful tools available. Here's how it works. The administration can restrict certain companies or banks from accessing the U.S. financial system. Assets can be frozen. Dollar transactions can be limited because the U.S. dollar dominates global trade access to it actually matters. You don't even need tax imports if a foreign company loses access to US capital markets or banking networks. That's pressure. Quiet pressure, but serious. Business owners watching this right now, I want you to pay close attention because what I'm about to say is extremely important. Every single missed phone call is lost money. Not maybe, not sometimes, every time. While you're busy running operations, handling clients, or closing deals, calls are coming in and going unanswered. That's why I built a software that works strategically for your business. It answers instantly, books appointments, qualifies leads, works 24/7, no sick days, no attitude, no missed opportunities. If you're serious about scaling like a CEO, I'm going to say that again. If you're serious about scaling like a CEO, not operating like a freelancer, click the link in the description and see what we can build for you. It's a software that works. Now let's get back to the power structure of the United States. Option number 4, export controls, strategic restriction. The president could hypothetically say this: if we can pressure imports the same way, we'll restrict exports. Export control allow the executive branch to limit the sale of advanced AI chips, military grade components, sensitive technologies. But here's the impact. Instead of taxing goods coming in, you control critical goods going out. If a rival nation relies on US semiconductor equipment, access is restricted. That's leverage. Different angles, same chessboard. Option number 5, federal procurement power. This one is honestly underrated. It's one of the ones you need to pay attention and listen to. The president could hypothetically use federal purchasing power to incentivize domestic production. Remember, the US government is the largest buyer in the world. So here's what could happen. The federal contracts prioritize domestic suppliers. Procurement standards are adjusted. Incentives are offered for reshoring manufacturing. No tariff required. You don't penalize imports directly. You reward domestic alignment. Supply chains shift naturally. That's influence without confrontation. But what about option 6? Regulatory compliance pressure. The president could hypothetically, I'm going to say that again, the president could hypothetically tighten regulatory scrutiny on foreign firms operating domestically. This is what it would look like. Increased national security reviews, stricter environmental compliance, licensing requirements, data security audits. You're not banning anyone, you're raising the standards legally, methodically. I'm going to say that again. You're raising the standards legally, methodically. What is that word? You're raising the standards legally. Let's just say that. That increases the operational cost without labeling it a tariff war. Strategic pressure. That is what you need. But what about option 7? Diplomatic leverage and negotiation. And finally, the president could hypothetically use negotiation leverage without formal tariff escalation. Trade talks, bilateral agreements, conditional access deals. For example, we ease pressure here if you open agricultural markets there. Tariffs were often signals. You can send signals through diplomacy too. Not every tool is legislative. Some are relational. But let me say this clearly first. Power is not one button. It's not one law. It's not one headline. If you think executive strength lives and dies on a single tariff ruling, you're thinking small. Real leadership adapts. Real leadership pivots. Real leadership doesn't complain about a tool removed. It reaches for the next one. There's so many tools in the box. Much more than you can ever imagine or see or think. I just mentioned a couple of them. You don't need unchecked power. You need strategic flexibility. You don't need a monarch. You need agility. Strength is not screaming at the system. Strength is mastering it. Now, here's the mature take. Yes, the president should have operational flexibility, especially in fast-moving trade conflicts. But no, that flexibility should not erase Congress. The Constitution gave trade authority to Congress for a reason. The executive executes, the legislature authorizes, the judiciary interprets. It's friction by design. Annoying, yes. Protective, also yes. A lot of regimes move fast. They don't ask for permission, but they don't also wait to do things that they need to do. But they also collapse fast when mistakes compound. Democracies move slower, but they endure longer. There's a reason global investors still trust American institutions. Stability beats speed over decades. But here's the emotional truth. When you support a strong president, you want him empowered. You don't want him to be boxed into procedure. But if you zoom out for a second, the same structure that limits him today protects the country tomorrow. This isn't POTUS versus SCOTUS. It is calibration. Not humiliation, calibration. This is a good functioning system that works together for the better of society in general. A strong president doesn't need absolute power. He needs clear authority, defined lanes, strategic creativity, institutional respect. And that is why the CEO analogy works. But remember, even CEOs answer to boards. Not because they're weak, because unchecked control destroys companies. Executive strength isn't about ruling alone. It's about navigating constraints better than anyone else. That's real power. Big Nathan reporting now. But before I leave, I'll leave you with the scripture. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 12. It is an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for the throne is established by the righteousness. I'm going to say that again. It is an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for the throne is established by righteousness. Leadership matters, structure matters, balance sustains nations. Stay tuned to Operation Pronto.